to make artists feel that they are not safe to be truthful, it's the most like it's the death of art. I don't want to be too like highfalutin with my language, but couldn't be anything more anti-art than that, because I mean that's what I define as art, is whatever is an honest expression of what's inside a person. And you might not like it, or it might not be pretty or whatever, but uh, if artists are afraid to express themselves truthfully, then we don't have art anymore.
Welcome to another installment of Live Free. I'm your host, Gene Owens. My guest today is a Savannah, Georgia-based singer-songwriter. His newest single, Lessons, is out now and available everywhere. Please welcome my friend, Tim Thompson.
Hey man, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It is going well. Thanks for joining me. So you're in Savannah, Georgia, but I know you're not from there originally, right? Where are you from originally?
Yeah, originally I'm from Northern Ontario, is where I was born and raised. West of Thunder Bay, for any of you Northern Ontario geography buffs out there.
Man, okay, another Canuck.
Yeah. And then I lived there till I was 16, and then my family moved to Maine. And yeah, I've been a few places, but here I am now.
So so you were born in Canada. So do you have dual citizenship?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a Canadian passport at the moment, but I have a Canadian birth certificate. I was natural born Canadian citizen, and then both my parents are American. So also I was a natural born American citizen, like Ted Cruz, basically.
I'll take your word.
But maybe without the Cuban, or what is Cuban, right?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I was going to bring up your Twitter bio, or I guess now it's X, but I'm always going to call it Twitter. It's always going to be Twitter. I mean, X is going to have to be around for like 20 more years for that to catch on, I think. And I don't know if civilization has 20 more years, so we'll see. But in your Twitter bio, it says, it reads, "Love politics and rock and roll." So is that... politics is something that you're passionate about? I mean, obviously, I see some of your tweets, so I know you're politically engaged with what's going on. But would you say politics is something that you're interested in and passionate about?
To some extent, yeah. I think it's definitely something that I'm interested in, just on a purely like not an entertainment level necessarily, but I'm really into history, and so from the perspective of making the connections between the past and the present, I like to follow what's going on politically, and so yeah, it's an interest of mine, and I also, as I've gotten a little older and having children and things like that, you start to pay a little more attention, become more aware to the way that things going on in the political realm actually impact our lives and the potential futures of our children. So yeah, it's something that I think it's interesting, because I think it's both more important and less important than people make it somehow. If that makes sense, we can unpack that a little bit maybe, but
Well, it seems like now everything is so political, like everything has a political slant or nature to it now, that it's impossible to avoid. Just the world we find ourselves in. It's very, there's a lot of extremes. We saw a lot of that over the past few years, right? Where as musicians decided to get back to playing shows, there was a lot of musicians that said the only way we're going to play is if everyone is injected, everybody shows proof of quote unquote vaccination to attend the shows. And then there were other artists that, granted very few of them, but some that said, all are welcome, and that we're not going to do that. Or they just kind of like waited to tour until things like died down and became and returned to normal. Or some semblance of normalcy. So, I mean, everything is so divisive now, either just beyond the last 3 years, but even getting into like the social issues and, do you stand for this cause or not? Or are you going to speak up on behalf of whatever, whether it's Palestine or Israel or Black Lives Matter or whatever the current trend is of the day? It's kind of
Right.
hard to avoid for anybody, let alone musicians and artists. But do you think it is an artist's role to throw their hat in the ring when it comes to these political issues?
Uh, no, in a word. I mean, I think it can be, but I don't think it's inherently an artist's role. I think an artist's role is much more personal than that, and it's going to be different depending on the artist, right? So in certain moments, it might be for a certain artist, but I wouldn't say that as a general rule that it's an artist's responsibility to engage politically or to advocate one way or another. I think an artist's role is to be honest as as and that's a life's work. That in itself is a life's work, just to figure out for as an artist oneself, to figure out what that means, to be honest with yourself, and then to learn how to express that to through your art, whether it's music or poetry or visual arts or whatever. And so sometimes, of course, those things that are close to us are will you know uh,
Kind of spill over into the art,
yeah,
or
into the
into the
realm
creative process?
or cultural commentary or whatever. But it should always just be the raw as possible, the expression of your soul as an artist. It shouldn't be a like a contrived sort of message that like like a preachy kind of thing. But then again, there are no rules, are there? So
Yeah, I mean, I think that there shouldn't be, but there are seemingly like now a lot of societally imposed rules on artists, especially with the rise of cancel culture
yeah.
and the use of social media platforms, right? It has really emboldened the mob and created this mob rule where,
Hmm.
and it doesn't just affect artists and content creators, it affects businesses, right?
Yeah.
Just if you have a law firm or you have a hotel or you have a restaurant, right now you're at the mercy of all these Yelp reviewers or Google reviewers, and they can literally negatively impact your business. And
Yeah, certainly.
and that can be done with just like one or two people that have an axe to grind with you personally, and they just rally their friends or their mob. Um, so that's a crazy thing to right now, because it's like how do we stay honest and speak our truth, create the art that we want to create without the fear of being canceled or having people that are offended come after us. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
How is the way forward for artists in this kind of climate of cancellation? And I feel like it's a very totalitarian, scary, Orwellian culture that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, certainly. I think you're correct. And I don't know, I don't know if I have any answers that are gonna save anybody's career, but but I think I think it is important to to be because of the way that we exist nowadays in such an online world where we're all sort of living in public all the time. It's become enough, I think, as an artist just to not tell any lies in terms of what you feel or think about something. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to be on social media super public about the things that they think about everything, but it just means exactly that. Just don't tell any lies about it. Don't let anybody tell you you're going to say this or else this, that, or the other. And in terms of I always go back to this when I talk about this subject, which is um, I think relationships are just super important in this context. Like to be friends with the people around you, like to be a good friend. to the people around you, like in your scene, or your sphere of influence, however small or large that might be. And that to me means, like, don't check people's politics before you engage with them, or before you book them on your show, or before you share a beer with them, or agree to do their show. Now, granted, I'm not saying do like some show for a cause that contradicts your conscience. Not That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you know, genuinely have relationships with the people around you, not just based on whether or not they share your specific point of view. And I think, because I think it's even though right now, quote unquote cancel culture sort of slants one way, maybe, right? But that doesn't mean it will always be that way. And so, even it just make yourself sort of uncancelable, I think, as much as possible, just by being a guy that people won't, and not that they won't, but would be less inclined to turn around and say, like, oh, screw that guy, he's a this, that, or the other, he's a Nazi, or he's a bigot, or whatever, because people have a relationship with you, and I know for my own political journey, if you want to call it that, this was a big thing. Like, it really was prior to the COVID stuff, but in the 2015, 16, 17 sort of Trump era, that whole turning of the culture, I was pretty vehemently anti-Trump in the 15, 16, and tried to discourage anybody I knew from getting on that wagon.
I was too, but I was also staunchly anti-Clinton.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Same,
for
same. I
me,
I was a Gary Johnson guy that year, which was, well, what are you gonna do?
yeah, I voted for Jill Stein. I was living in California, so I voted for
Yeah.
Jill Stein.
Uh, but a big part of making me sort of stop and think was realizing that, despite the fact that I didn't care for the guy, and I thought whatever I thought, I don't even know. It was a long time ago. I was in my early 20s. Forgive me. But whatever I thought at the time, I saw people trying to tell me that, you know, my family members, or my, people I went to church with, or whatever, these people that I knew and loved and respected and had all kinds of admiration for, rightly so, because they were good people, genuinely. And they had their reasons for voting the way that they voted, and for believing the things that they believed, which in many cases, not all, but many cases, I've, you know, in my opinion, they've turned out to be right. Uh, but people were trying to tell me that those people were bad people. I should disassociate from those people. They were, deplorable or reprehensible, or whatever adjective you want to use. But because I had those relationships, those strong relationships that were more important, it caused me to be like, well, hang on now, wait a minute. I know that that's not true. I know that uh, the typical Trump voter is not, in the KKK or whatever, because I know them. They're my whatever. I don't want to call anybody out, but they're my family members. They're my friends, uh, and thank God that was enough for me to be like, well, hold on. Rather than just pushing those people away, I started to question and realize that, well, if they're going to lie to me about that, which I know is a lie, or at least they're wrong about, then what else are they wrong about or lying about? And once you start asking that question, and not being afraid of the answer, then you're on a journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yes, that's where a lot of this division began culturally here.
Yeah.
In America, but also just around the whole world. It's funny. I've spoken to people that live in Iceland, and during the last 3 years, if they were pro freedom of choice when it came to what to inject in their body or not, if they were being called Trump supporters, even though they're in another country, they can't vote, they can't influence the American election at all. So it's
It's
weird.
funny. I was in a
Yeah.
oh, sorry, I was in a bar in Iceland in middle of 2020, that got the cops came in and measured to make sure there was 2 meters between everybody, and then they shut the bar down.
Oh man, insane. That's wild, man. Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't
it
really
was
hear
it
much
was
coming from Iceland. You would hear about what was going on in Australia, in Canada, New Zealand, but it didn't really. And Sweden, of course, right? Sweden
mhm,
was. We all heard that Sweden never locked down, and it was life as usual. Um, though I only knew one person that lived in Sweden. I reached out to that person, and they were like deathly afraid. So even though Sweden wasn't locked down, this person was personally locked down. So they were not a good source of like what is going on out there. Are people just
yeah,
living their lives, which they were, and everything was fine. But yeah, we saw that divisiveness start and really ramp up with the 2016 election, and it was like forcing people to choose a side and then create the. I think it intentionally was meant to create this false dichotomy, right? You're like one of the good guys, or you're like for Trump, and
mhm,
it also it was during that process. I think the left got co-opted, like insanely co-opted. The left that had been previously liberal had stood for bodily autonomy, for freedom of expression, and was anti-censorship, was anti-war, was somehow now flipped because they had this outsider despot of Trump that they had to be on the same side as Congress. They had to be on the same side as the war machine opposite Trump. This weird false dichotomy, and that division has just continued to perpetuate through the COVID years and into where we find ourselves now. Speaking of which, what do you foresee happening in this year ahead? We're entering an election year. 2024 will be the next presidential election. It looks like it's, as far as I can tell, it's just Biden, a repeat of Biden and Trump, and then you've got a possible third party candidate with RFK Jr. What do you foresee happening?
man, I don't know. I mean, I hope, nothing happens out of the ordinary, I hope it's just another election year and it goes the way it looks like it's gonna go, and maybe we
Doesn't that seem
can.
like impossible at this point?
Yeah,
Like with
yeah.
everything that has been thrown at us over the past 4 years?
It seems, yeah, probably less than 50-50. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough, man. I really try to be, I try to be not necessarily optimistic, but I try to be not afraid or not alarmed or super discouraged. But it is difficult. But I mean, at the moment, I'm just in a sort of, keep your ear to the ground and pay attention to what's happening. But um, so far, nothing. So we we'll just see how it goes. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
I think it goes
if
back to
it
what you were saying about community, really. That at the end of the day,
yeah.
that's really all but what we should be putting our energies into.
Yeah, I think so. I think so because in that case, no matter what happens, you're gonna have that network, that foundation of those real relationships that aren't just gonna be thrown away for nothing. I mean, I don't know, and I'll grant you and whoever's listening, maybe I'm naive, but I genuinely think, I have quite a few, fairly close friends who are totally not on the same page as me with almost anything. I mean, they're as close to communist as I am to anything else. And that's okay. We have mutual respect. We both we're good people. We want good things for people. We just don't have the same vision of how those things maybe will come about. So
That's amazing
yeah,
that you know communists that could tolerate any difference of opinion.
yeah. I don't know, man. No. I'm kind of maybe well. Am I exaggerating? I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe this fine gentleman is not a communist, but maybe I'll ask him one day. Are you a communist? I think he would tell me if he was, and he might be, but that's okay. I grew up in a commune. I get it.
Did you really?
I
In
did. Yeah.
in Canada, or where was the
Yeah. In
commune?
Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. It was in Canada, right in the wilds of northwestern Ontario, on a lake in the woods.
So were your parents just like big hippies, or what was the commune like, and why did they choose to Like, were they trying to live outside of the system?
Yeah, yeah, it was a sort of it's a little it's a little vague to me where how related it is to like the sort of Jesus people movement that you may have heard of, like the things like the Vineyard Church came out of, and things like that in California. It was a similar time frame. It was like in the mid '70s.
Okay, yeah, I'm not
That
familiar with the Jesus people, and
okay.
we don't just mean Christians here. Yeah, this was a
No, no, I mean it's a
particular
specific. Yeah,
this is a
there's
particular
a
group, the Jesus people.
yeah. Well, so when Bob Dylan was converted to Christianity,
Mhm.
and that was a sort of a byproduct of the Jesus people movement, which was the sort of a revival of sorts in a sort of a charismatic churches, and the Vineyard Church, and I think Calvary Chapel. I might be getting all this wrong. I'm not a church history expert here, but I believe the Vineyard Church and the Calvary Chapel and maybe some others came out of that movement. So and where the place I grew up was a sort of a commune of sort of like-minded people, wanted to live outside the system. Like you say, they kind of had a vision that, things were gonna go a bit sideways. And there were some maybe misguided guesses as to when that might be, but that wasn't really the point. The dating wasn't really the point. The point was to get outside of the system, to live self-sufficiently, in such a way that they thought was uh the right way for people to live. So yeah, that's how I grew up, and it changed a lot over the years. From when my parents first were there back in the '70s, it was like, no running water, no electricity, uh, like had a legit ice house that they kept blocks of ice in. They cut out of the lake in the winter and had it for like keeping meat cool and stuff in the summer, and all that kind of stuff. So by the time I came along, we had running water and electricity, and eventually telephones, and even the internet, God forbid. But it was still, we grew our own food on the farm. We had, chickens and cows, and uh, yeah, it was great. I really, really loved it. I still have friends that live there. My sister lived there for years with her family. She doesn't now, but I have friends and some family that still live there.
And this is in what part of Canada?
It's in Northern Ontario.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's west of Thunder Bay. Like if you were just driving across Canada on the only highway,
And
you'd
so
you'd go right
yeah,
through this area.
that's super interesting.
Mhm.
I've only had small tastes of like of living periods outside of what would be like the structured, system as it were,
Mhm.
like camping in national parks and things like that, but I've never lived on a commune. I know that's something that there's really been a resurgence of people wanting to exit and build, like I don't know if you follow Derek Brose's work, but
Mm-mm.
he's commentator and an independent journalist, and he's written several books that revolve around this concept of like there are really bad things on the horizon for humanity, like this the impending dystopian technocracy, right? That seems that entities like the WEF want to push forward, where everybody needs a digital ID and digital currency to take part in society, and you won't own any private property. Everything will be owned kind of by the state. It's very communist, if you will. It's
Yeah.
like commie techno fascist future, scary stuff. And so anyway, like Derek Bros and other people are advocating for like exiting and building your own parallel society outside of this, outside of the mechanisms of this new growing technocratic empire. So yeah, it's very appealing. I I wish I had more faith in people working together, and
Mhm.
putting their differences aside, but it sounds like you grew up in an environment where they did that. They did just that, and they built this whole community outside of the system.
Yeah, I
Did
mean,
did something happen to make your parents wanna leave and take you away from that? Or what
no,
was
no,
yeah,
it was just a it wasn't, it was just, family. Some of my dad's family, were in Maine. When we moved to a place where there was a sort of similar it wasn't a community, like a co-located, community where everybody lived on the same property, but we continued to be in that network. There's a network of these types of communities all across the country and across the world, as a matter of fact. But So no, it was never there was no like we didn't leave on bad terms or anything like that. And it's yeah, it's interesting because they are still there, and like I said, I still have a lot of friends who live there, and it's I always enjoyed living there growing up. And when you're a kid, you're always kind of a bit restless and you're ready to get out in the world and see other things, do other things. But I was not any more so than like I think the normal person is living anywhere else. And I always have looked back on it fondly and had good memories of it. And increasingly as things sort of begin to really feel like they are spinning out of control, it's definitely a source of comfort just knowing that those places are there, and knowing that I've had that experience and I can sort of envision something like that in the future if it became necessary, either to, go back there or, do something like that with a group of people somewhere. Um, but yeah, I mean, the whole thing that started us down here was the communist idea. But the interesting thing about it is that it really does only work if everybody has the same vision, which is why it just can't work on a like a societal scale. You can't have a a commune, which is what the communists want. The international community of whatever proletarians, whatever you want to call it, because there's as many ideas of the way things should run as there are people. But in the case of
Well,
this context specifically, it was it was not to get too woo woo, but I mean, people had their faith and they had a belief in something higher than everybody else that they referred to. And rather than putting, like an individual in charge of the community, there was, a group of people who were sort of administrating, and they were sort of, you could say, in charge, but they were always accountable and always, anybody could come and say, the big key to it was everybody just being like in the scripture all the time, because people could just come to these people who were in charge and say like, hey, you're wrong, here's how, and I'll show you chapter and verse literally. And then not that they would necessarily resolve it right then and there, but it would be something that everybody was held accountable to, rather than there being like in a cult or something where one guy is like, all right, I'm gonna have all your wives and you guys are gonna.
so you're saying everything came back to biblical scripture in the
Yeah,
commune and in
yeah,
terms of the leadership of it and the direction
right,
of it. Well, it's another difference, right, from that commune to
yeah,
compared to communist states throughout history, because all the communist regimes have always hated religion. They
right.
don't want anything to rival the state and the state power. So in China or Soviet USSR, they always wanted to ban and suppress religion because there couldn't be any other idol other than the state.
Yeah, because the fear of God trumps the fear of the state. Yeah.
Yes.
Or any other authority. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, fuck communism. But that's just where I'm
Yeah. No, hey, I'm with you.
at.
But I love my communist friends nonetheless.
So very interesting. How old were you when you left the commune in Canada?
16.
16. Okay, so you
Yeah.
were a young adolescent at that point. So had you already started playing music up there? And was living on the commune something that inspired you to create art and create music?
Yeah, for sure. Interestingly, because we had that sort of insular uh, little, mini society. I mean, we weren't like totally cut off from larger. Like I, took piano lessons out in music school and things like that when I was a kid. So it wasn't like we were super super sheltered or anything. But we had that sort of insular community. But as a result of that, I grew up around. Uh, a lot more songwriters than I think most people are exposed to. My uncle wrote a lot of songs. I had one of my mom's close friends was a very prolific songwriter. I mean, I probably off the top of my head, I can think about like 6 or 7 people that I knew who wrote songs all the time, and some of them, like my uncle, for one, hundreds of songs that he wrote, maybe 1,000 plus over the years. Um, and they were, gospel songs or songs for people to sing together in church and stuff. But that was always around, so it was not. It was something that you could picture yourself doing. and something that really, I guess, it inspired me. Like you could write a song and then everybody would learn it and sing it together. And, and my uncle had also this great old reel to reel like tape recorder that he would record stuff on. And then he was always showing us like, oh, I double tracked this and it sounds like this, and weird, weird little things he would do that as a kid, I didn't really understand what he was on about, because I had no context of like, you know, uh, the Beatles or something, I didn't know, but I always thought it was really cool, and he was just always noodling with that stuff. It was great.
So you didn't get a lot of outside music, a lot of like secular music living up
No,
there.
not too much. Not until a little bit later on. I've definitely had like
And was that
uh
something that was just kind of like forbidden on the commune, that you weren't allowed to have any secular music? That rock and roll was evil, that kind of
it
vibe,
wasn't.
or
I mean, there was a definite sort of like if you were to take a poll of the grown-ups on the commune, yeah, most of them would have probably told you that rock and roll was evil. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't as if people were coming into your house and checking through your CD cabinets. At least not where I lived. But in our house, in my family specifically, it was pretty not allowed for a while. But I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so by the time I came along, some cracks were appearing in the armor here and there. I remember my brother had got this. It's such a funny story now, but he had got this Eric Clapton record. I think it's called My Father's Eyes, I think is what the record is called, but it has like Tears in Heaven on it or whatever. And my parents were gonna make him throw it away because my dad obviously knew who Eric Clapton was. I don't even know if my mom knew who he was, but my dad knew who he was and was like, "You can't have this." Like he wrote a song called Cocaine kind of thing. and and Luke, my brother, was like, I thought it was. I think he was lying. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe not. But he was saying, it's called My Father's Eyes. I thought it was a Christian CD, whatever. Anyways, they were gonna make him throw it away, but I think we were on the way home from church, so they made the rest of us all go inside, and then my mom and dad and my brother sat in the car and listened to it. And to my parents' great credit, they didn't make him throw it away after they listened to it. So, and I wasn't privy to that interaction, but it's stood out to me. And I hold my parents in very high regard for that they didn't make him throw it away. And anyways, that was the first crack in the armor that I remember. And then from there, it was more of a case by case basis. But by the time I was, a young teenager, it was like what I was looking at getting, like I was into like U2, and I was buying their stuff, and that was all fine by then.
what period of U2 would that have been? Were you like getting into them as with the releases that were coming out at that time, or were you like going back and like
The
just
first thing I
buying?
got was Joshua Tree,
Okay,
because
yeah.
that was
So
like the legendary one. Yeah. And then I kind of branched off in both directions from there at different periods. I went, first with their, newer releases, and then later on got into the stuff that came before. But
yeah,
yeah,
Joshua Trees is still an amazing
so great.
album.
I went to see the like 2017 tour, and where did I see that? Louisville, Kentucky. Man, that was good.
Yeah, yeah. I'm, I would say I'm not a fan of Bono's activism and the company he keeps these days.
Yeah, no,
But
definitely.
you know,
But
but I musically they made some great albums,
yeah,
and beautifully produced albums too. Just
yeah,
very
amazing
atmospheric.
stuff.
Having like Brian Eno and I'll probably butcher his last name, but Daniel Lenoir,
Yeah,
creating those kind of just like the atmospheric textures with the synths and the tracking the edges guitar and that kind of rhythmic, hypnotic vibe that he was able to accomplish. It's something very special. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Me
know.
and my friend Kevin, we often talk about how irrelevant U2 has become to us, and how amazing that is, considering how influential they always have been as well.
Would you
And
say
it's
you two were they like the first like secular band that you heard and that you connected with and that influenced you?
yeah, definitely the first that influenced me. Yeah, because I got into like who they were into. So I like got there's this book, it's called U2 by U2, and it's just like essays that they all wrote of like their story as a band, and I got a hold of that, and then I just started. Anytime they made reference to a band, I would just get into it, and of course they have great influences. You know, you can't argue with Joy Division and the Sex Pistols and Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground and on and on and on. So yeah, they were hugely influential in that regard and getting me into sort of the right influences.
So it sounds like it was the music you were exposed to on the commune of the family members, the people in the church group playing music, playing gospel songs and writing music was
Mhm.
probably a big influence and kind of planted the seeds of like this is something you can do.
Yeah.
And and then once you discovered things like U2, that just kind of furthered the lit took that spark and kind of made it
Yeah.
go
And
from
I think
there.
to try and draw like a bit of a narrative thread through it all, I think what if there is a thread that ties it all together, it kind of relates back to the conversation about relationship, because what it actually is sharing music with other people. Like if you go to a U2 show, that's like church. Like that's there you're singing the song with 40,000 other people that everybody knows the words to and everybody, believes in, and it's the same type of experience as, singing a song in church with 50 other people. And that's always been what I'm passionate about. That's me and my fiance were talking about this the other day, like the difference between the way that I'm into music and other people that are, I think, influenced by like the rock and roll history, like I am, and the way that like a person who makes beats in their bedroom is into music. It's like almost not the same thing at all, because it's fun to like write songs in your bedroom and make demos and stuff, but the whole point is to get out in front of people, play them, get people to like them, sing them back to you, share that. That's like I get so much fulfillment in this little scene here in Savannah, just going to open mics every week and singing my friends' songs that they're singing, and then seeing them do the same thing. I mean, it's just that's enough for me, man. Like I obviously want to be the world's biggest rock star, just like everybody else does, right? But that's enough. Like I get that that's not a thing anymore, and it's enough for me to just go and share that with my friends and have their respect and really genuinely respect them too, because I'm like, man, I really dig what you're doing, and they're like, man, I dig what you're doing too, and like that's it, man. That like so
And it seems like you have a really supportive scene in Savannah. Like I got a little taste of that when you
yeah,
invited me to play the wormhole over this past summer with
the
you.
worm.
Yeah, right. The wormhole. That was that spot. It was super fun, man. And thank you again for inviting us and having us
Yeah,
on
man, I
that
appreciate you
bill.
guys coming down.
Absolutely. I would love to do it again. But
Yeah.
yeah, just I could tell that the other people on that bill and just like little scene that was in that club just seemed really supportive. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and that's hard to come by.
Hmm.
Being having lived in Atlanta for a good chunk of my adult life and playing music, I always wanted to foster that kind of scene, but I could just like never make that happen. I don't know if it's just because the nature of the city is just this giant sprawl, and there's like a few clubs in town and then there's all like the suburbs and it's just like everybody's just so spread out. Similarly, like the way Los Angeles is,
Hmm.
maybe it's hard to just have one kind of like cohesive supportive scene. Um, but yeah, that's something I definitely applaud you for and what y'all have achieved in Savannah because it seems like artists are going out and supporting one another and lifting each other up, and there's a cool community there, a music community, and I totally dig that. And I wish there was more of that. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
I'm a big fan. I don't know how much, I don't take any credit myself for like making it happen. I just know that it's I started getting into the scene in like the end of I guess end of 2019, and then of course there was the whole COVID interruption. Um but yeah, it's just kind of always been there's always been supportive people around, and then it's grown significantly though since I've been in town, or since I've been going out and seeing who's around or whatever, there's been more and more people coming around, and yeah, it's just been exciting to watch it happen. Because when I first started going around, there was me and a couple of other guys would talk about the way we wanted the scene to develop, and it actually has happened that way, and it's like nobody forced it, which is really cool. Like, just one day, like, I didn't have a band for the longest time, and then one day it just occurred to me, like, I'm in this message group with like 25 other musicians, and I got a gig coming up. So I just put a message like, "Hey, does anybody want to like play drums and bass?" And then, of course, like within 15 minutes, I had a band. So I'm like, "Oh, great! Well, that worked out." And there's kind of a lot of that going around here right now, and it's cool. It's exciting.
Well, speaking of music, why don't we listen to your newest single, "Lessons," which came out earlier this year? And I'm gonna go ahead and play the video, and then after the video, let's talk about the inspiration behind the song and the process of all that and the release. But here is Tim Thompson's "Lessons."
I've been trying to learn my lessons, but it's hard to know the difference between striking while the iron is hot, kicking while the man is down. Am I going the extra mile? Am I just running up the score? We've all got to keep playing the game, even if we don't want to play it no more. Can grace really cover sin? Is there enough to go around after all the winners win? Is fear the only reason I don't want to let you in? All these and other questions, I'm trying to learn my lessons. And the battle rages on in the heart of every woman and man. We've come a long way from the garden. We've got a long way to get back. These changes that we're swimming in make a heart sick and head spin. Is there an anchor for my soul? Is there a candle in your window? Can grace really cover sin? Is there enough to go around after all the winners win? Is fear the only reason I don't want to let you in? All these and other questions, I'm trying to learn my lessons. Is there enough to go around after all the winners win? Is fear the only reason I don't want to let you in? All these and other questions, I'm trying to learn my lessons. Deep, how wide is love? How high, how far will it go? Till I am broken,
Nice, man.
Thanks. That's as low budget a video as anyone will ever see.
Oh man, I'm sure there's lower budgets out there. No, but it's a terrific song. What
Thank you.
was the inspiration behind that? How did that song come to be?
The first little seed of an idea was the line, the first line. I've been trying to learn my lessons, but it's hard to know the difference between striking while the iron is hot and kicking while a man is down. And that came from there's this songwriter called Bill Maloney, which many people are not familiar with. So it's my great honor and privilege to be able to shout him out every time I have an interview about this song. But he's this tremendous songwriter, singer-songwriter, originally, I think, from Athens, but he lives out west now.
From Athens, Georgia?
Yeah, Athens, Georgia, I should say.
That's my neck of the woods right now.
Yeah. Incredibly prolific songwriter. But for somebody who's written, I mean, genuinely thousands of songs, the quality of every single song is just amazing. But I was listening to an interview with him, and it just came into my head for relative to something that was being said in the interview, and I don't remember what that was, but it just sounded like the kind of line that he might write, and I really latched onto it. And then,
and what's that songwriter's name?
Bill Maloney.
Did he have a band in Athens, or
he had a band called the Vigilantes of Love?
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought that name sounded familiar. I only know of that band. It's weird because I was literally listening to them just a few days ago.
Wow.
I only know of Vigilantes of Love. They were around in like the late 80s, early 90s in Athens. I know of them because we got a review of our first Faithless Town record, American Refugee, by this publication that's now defunct, but it was called Stomp and Stammer. And it was kind of like it was like a Georgia-based kind of indie rock free magazine that would cover the new releases and shows and such. And they compared us to Vigilantes of Love, and I never heard of them. So I sought out one of their records. Well, I guess so, man. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I think so. Anyways.
Yeah, I get it, because the dude's kind of got, for us, it's like he's got that baritone.
Yeah.
And and they did kind of like an alt country rock country vibe. So I get the comparison for sure. But yeah, sorry to sidetrack you. I was just I know this guy that he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So the lyrics and then the sort of like cowboy chord type, progression comes kind of inspired by him. And then also Jesse Malin is a big person I was listening to a lot around the time I was writing that song and some others. So it has that same, which is the same kind of like Americana, but also with a rock and roll edge. It's funny because I say Americana and people are like, yeah, not really. It doesn't sound like Americana. I'm like, no, I get it. But anyways, that's what was in my head. This is what it sounds like when I try to do Americana.
I hear the Americana in it. What do you get to have a banjo in it for it to be Americana these days?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then the lyrics wise, it's just kind of I think maybe more and more as my son gets older, I kind of write things that are like I'm trying to pass on some sort of tidbit of like fatherly wisdom. And I don't know if it's really coming through, but that's kind of the thrust, the direction that song is trying to go in. Yeah.
How old is your son now?
He's 5.
5. And you've got another one on the way, right?
Yes, we do have another one on the way.
Well, congratulations. Yeah, I think I saw one of your posts recently. So
yeah, we just
sonogram
announced it at Thanksgiving. Yeah,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, so being a father and wanting to impart some of that wisdom that was that kind of informed or inspired that song, or you put that into the lyrics of lessons.
Yeah. I think, and just sort of, that idea of like, that's life, that's the journey through life. Always, no matter how grown you get, is just trying to learn your lessons one at a time, trying to make it as painless as possible, but knowing that it's not going to be. And then even in the bridge, there's kind of that hint of like, testing the limits of it, like how far does this go? How far can you push it? And then it always comes back to faith in a sense with me, even though I don't necessarily try to push songs in that direction. But yeah, I mean the bridge is really for the sort of keen-eyed scripture buffs. They will know that that's kind of pulled from a biblical phraseology about the love of God being, deep and wide. So
Well, I was definitely picking up on the biblical references of the garden and then just the chorus lyric of "Can grace really cover sin?"
yeah, well, that is very on the nose. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also have
what does
to,
that line mean? What does that line mean to you?
yeah, that line is just I've had is just about that. I think it's actually, it almost sounds like it sounds like a cool line to say, but I think it's actually, if you let it kind of hit you, uh, it's super huge. And in fact, like to me, writing it, I was realizing that you'll get to places in your life, no matter where you started out or where you end up, you'll go through seasons where you're not sure if what you've done can be undone. Like if you've messed up too badly, if you can be forgiven, if you can, be redeemed. And that's kind of that feeling that I'm alluding to in that line of it's not necessarily, depending on the moment that you're at in your life, would determine whether it's a rhetorical question or whether it's genuinely something that you're not quite sure about in that moment.
I dig it. I dig it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems that your faith and your connection to God is still something that's very powerful and kind of is an integral part of your creative process. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, certainly so. I wouldn't say like, I definitely don't write like church music, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily even write. I definitely don't write Christian music from the perspective of the Christian music industry. Just put it
Mm.
that way. But yeah, those things are always like, it's hugely important in my life, and it always has been. Although, like anybody who grew up, I think like anybody who grew up, anybody I know, anyways, that grew up very religious in a very specific sort of sect or denomination, you go on your own journey and you maybe drift away or in one direction or another direction, and you have to figure it all out, figure out what it all means for yourself in your life. Um, but yeah, it's always remained important to me. And yeah, it does always, it does come up a lot, simply because it's my worldview, and
Yeah,
so anything I am thinking about in a cultural context or political context or whatever, it all comes back through that filter. um just like anybody else, the way that you see the world, the filter through which you see the world, everything is coming in through that, and then consequently whatever you put out is shaped by it as well.
absolutely. Well, that song "Lessons" came out earlier this year, and it was put out by a Swiss music label, right? Eight
Yeah,
Hours Records.
yeah, Benoit, yeah, my friend Benoit. Yeah, that's interesting. I got
Oh,
turned on to that label by I saw that they'd signed to put out a couple of Joseph Arthur's records back in 2021, I think.
yeah,
Maybe
shout out to
yeah,
Joseph
2021.
Arthur, who
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think we've both been on his show, I believe,
Yeah.
on
Yeah, a couple times,
TNT.
yeah. Yeah, and
And
I got a chance to hang out with him in New York several weeks ago. It was cool. So,
nice.
um, yeah. but I saw that they had signed to put out some of his records. And so I just looked into like what else they had going on their label. Saw it was just this little small thing. And so I reached out to Benoit, who runs the label. And we just kind of talked back and forth a little bit about music and, his sort of, he's not, or he doesn't come across to me as an overtly like political person. It wasn't like an act of like protest or something from his part to sign Joseph Arthur. It was just that's somebody he's always admired, and he saw the opportunity and was like, "Hey, I'd like to put out some of your music." And I was like, "Well, that's cool. That despite the fact that Joseph was sort of persona non grata in the industry, that this guy would still step up and be like, look, I don't care. You seem like a decent guy and I like your music. Can I, could we work together?" And so that I loved both of those. I loved the fact that he wasn't like a political activist and he wasn't doing it out of that. But I also loved the fact that he didn't really care that nobody else would work with Joseph at the time. And so, yeah, I just stayed in touch with him and eventually we had talked about, I had sort of asked about, putting out something on the label. And then eventually it came around to, earlier this year, he was like, "Oh, we have some time I have room to do a release. Would you want to do a single or something?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it." So I went up to Nashville and recorded with some of my old friends from when I lived up there, and it came out great. Yeah. Super.
Yeah, man. It sounds awesome. What was
I'm super happy with it.
Yeah. I don't know where you recorded, but just the audio quality is very premium. It sounds really lush and big.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna look it up real quick because I want to shout out I'm terrible with the name of this studio. The guy's name's Troy Deaton. I know his name. He's a good friend of mine, but I forget the name of his studio. So I'm gonna go to my Bandcamp and look it up real quick.
Oh, and speaking of Bandcamp, is that the best place for folks to find you? Where's the best place to find Tim Thompson's music and connect with you? And
yes, definitely. I mean, I prefer Bandcamp. I don't know. I mean, I know people have issues with Bandcamp, rightfully so, but I like it as a place to put my music up because I can have everything in one place. I have stuff that I put out when I had a band back in Nashville, my like punk rock days, and I have new stuff, and it's all there. You can also find it everywhere else. You can stream my music everywhere that you stream music, but yeah, Bandcamp is like, I kind of use it as my website for the time being. But yeah, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever, any place. There's like 70. I was looking the other day at my DistroKid and I'm like, what are all these stores I've never heard of? There's so many. But if you're using whatever, Deezer or Yandex, I'm there.
Yes, and they're probably all still paying fractions of a cent for.
I've not gotten a single penny from any of them other than Spotify, Apple, and Amazon, or Google maybe. But
yeah, well, hopefully, I bought your record off Bandcamp or iTunes, so hopefully you got my money.
I very much appreciate that. Yeah,
I try to support my fellow artists, and Bandcamp, because of their censorship over the past couple years, deplatforming Brad from 5 Times August and Bryson Gray and a few other artists like that, and Tim Pool just taking their music off and completely with no notice and no recourse given to the artists. I think that's pretty sketchy, just for me personally. But I understand a lot of people.
Look, don't get me wrong. I think it's reprehensible, and I want them to stop if they're watching. Stop it up right now, you guys. But
listen to us, Bandcamp. Stop this. Yes. I really wish they would. And I think they just got sold to another company. So who knows? Maybe there will be a changing of the guards and changing of their policies. But yeah, that's where we find ourselves in this day and age, where it's scary to see people just being their music being disappeared because of some statement or even a song. This guy that just came on my radar is Tennessee Jet, who is a songwriter from Oklahoma, who just had a show in Tulsa canceled over the song that he just put out called 2+2. And it's, basically a reference to Orwell's, right? 1984, 2+2 = 5.
Yeah.
So, I just think yeah, hopefully we can just get back to making art, and music venues can stop being the arbiters of like what is acceptable art and what's not, and they can let the free market decide, and
Yeah.
let people decide whether they want to come and support those shows or those artists, and and stop, trying to be the arbiters of truth and the censors of music and art. Because I personally think people that go out of their way to deplatform and censor artists are like the lowest karmic life forms.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because it's to make artists feel that they are not safe to be truthful. It's the most like it's the death of art. I don't want to be too like highfalutin with my language, but couldn't be anything more anti-art than that. Because I mean, that's what I define as art is whatever is an honest expression of what's inside a person. And you might not like it or it might not be pretty or whatever, but uh if artists are afraid to express themselves truthfully, then we don't have art anymore. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that.
And
And
that
I can't
brings it.
find the credit for the name of this. I think it's Foxwood Studio. But if you want to know where I recorded in Nashville, send me a direct message. They are wide open, and I will let you know how to get in touch with those guys.
Yes. Well, Tim, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure connecting with you. I hope that we can play another show again soon.
Yeah, man, I
Either
hope
in
so. I was out of town when you invited me to play in Atlanta, and I really, really want to collaborate again. And I'm also trying to get some sort of out of town, but not too far out of the way shows lined up in the near future. So yeah, let's definitely stay in touch about that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Let's make something happen soon. And I will put links to your Bandcamp and to your Twitter in the show notes. And until next time, Tim Thompson,
Right
stay
on, man.
fearless, man. And
Thank you, man.
I'll talk to you soon. Live free.